and welcome to episode 261 of the Small and Supercharged podcast with Ria Freeman. Well, hello podcast listeners. I hope all is good with you this wonderful Wednesday, or if you're listening on another day, whatever day you're listening. Today we're going to talk about reflection. And I know this might seem a little bit out there for me, but it's something that through my ILM training we talked about a lot. And actually, it's something that I've done forever. And I think we all reflect on things. It's usually what went wrong and, oh my God, everything's a disaster. That's not really what we're going for today. But it's a really, really useful training aid. It's a really useful learning tool that you can do on your own, you can do in your head, you can do on pen and paper, you can do on your phone, you can do on voice notes, and you can make it your own. It can be really, really positive. It can give you a clear direction in terms of not just areas you need to develop, but also where you're really, really strong. And I think through doing the ILM 7 that I've done, we've done a huge amount on reflection, and it's been really interesting. And I think actually when we do reflect more on situations, we start to see patterns in ourselves. It helps to improve our own self-awareness. And that can be really empowering, and it can help boost confidence. But also if you're part of a team, however that is, if you're part of a group, if you're part of a friends group, if you're part of a team at work, if you work on your own, however, whatever it is, you know where your skills lie, and that can be really, really useful. It can be useful in knowing that actually you're a flipping rock star at a load of things, and you've been reflecting on it, you've done the learning, and more that's become that pattern. And then you can also establish where you're not such a rock star, where maybe you need a bit more help, whether you need to do further training, further learning, work with somebody, work with a mentor, work with a coach, or whether it's just things that actually you maybe need to understand the basics of it, but it doesn't interest you whatsoever. And that's okay too, because I think there's some things in everyone's business, in everyone's world, that just don't interest them. It might just be you know what, we have to do it, but it's just not my strong area. I don't enjoy it. I know this about myself, so I'm going to use my time differently. It can be really useful for trying to, through the whole round peg, square hole thing. It makes just a lot more sense. So I want to talk about a few questions that you could ask yourself around the reflection topic. Now, you can call it review if you want. You can call it whatever word you want, to be honest, I think. But what I would really urge you to do is give it a spin. Honestly, whatever you're doing, it's a really good thing to do. So it could be how you handled a situation at home. It could be something at work. It could be, crikey, it could be how you're managing your inbox. It could be how you're keeping on top of things, how you're feeling overwhelmed, or something that's actually gone really flipping well for you. And what strengths can you draw out of that? So before we deep dive into the joys of reflection and some questions that might be useful to ask yourself, I just want to give Small and Supercharged a little shout out, really. This is my membership group full of fabulous people, the most amazing community, but also marketing masterclasses, mindset masterclasses, social media trainings, live Q&As, so much opportunities. There's just loads packed in there. And it's a great, great place for helping businesses as well as individuals grow and thrive, learning more skills and helping to develop in the ways that they want to. If you are interested in the fabulous group, please do pop over to riafreemanpr.co.uk, and at the top you'll see a Small and Supercharged Mastermind headline option. Head over to there, click on there, there's a form to fill in, and then I'll send you the information. But now let's get back to reflection. So stick with me on this. Try and think of a situation Any situation you can. It doesn't have to have gone badly. It could have gone really, really well. It could be a trip to the supermarket. It could be a project at work. It could be an interaction with a client. It could be a job you did. Keep that in your mind for a minute. And these are just some questions that I think about when I'm looking at a situation. I think about what worked well. What did I do well? What went well with the project? Because I think sometimes we are always looking for those negatives, because the negatives can help us improve. I get that, because finding a negative, finding something we're a little bit weak on, gives us that opportunity to do that deep dive, do that further learning. But looking at what went well helps us develop our self-awareness and our self-confidence in lots of other ways. Because then you can potentially start to identify a pattern if you do this more often as well. So what went really well? This could be perhaps that you handled the pressure really, really well. That something didn't go well, but you managed it. It could be that you just performed out your skin and delivered the best presentation ever. Could be that there were different personalities in what you were dealing with, and actually you identified them and you made everyone play to their strengths, or you helped everybody play to their strengths. Or that you picked a good time to go shopping. It can be literally anything you can think of is what I'm keen to do. So what went well? And spend some time on this. Try and think of a good few things. And even if you think I've got nothing about that situation went well, the fact you got to the end, or the fact that you left, there is always some good stuff in any situation. So maybe it was an absolute disaster, but you turned up on time, you kept your emotions in check, you remained polite even when you really didn't want to, you left in a polite way, you stayed till the end, or you thought, you know what, this isn't good for me, and you took that decision to leave. Maybe you achieved your objective, even though it was an absolute swine. You achieved your objective at the end and you pushed on. There are always positives to be had. So think hard about them. Think about what went well. Write it down, record it in your phone. There is something rather lovely about writing it down, but whatever works for you. And then think about what didn't go well. Now, these are much easier to find. Having a list of things that did not go well is much, much easier to find. So, today I took the dog for a walk. The dog was really well behaved. We did some good things. She was awesome. All I'm thinking of, though, is that I wore the wrong clothes. I was sweating like a pig. Oh gosh, what else happened? I don't think anything really bad happened. A lady panicked because I don't think she can control her dog terribly well. Then she has a bit of a meltdown, and actually there's no reason to because the dog's perfectly nice. I've spoken to her husband, and I then felt bad that I made her panic. Actually, that wasn't on me. You can always think of things that didn't go well, and it's much, much easier to think of those things. So again, she was awesome today, but if the dog, if I recalled the dog and the dog's recall was slow once, I would be thinking, well, it's a flipping disaster. The recall doesn't work. But yeah, I recalled her, say, 20 times, and one time she was slightly slow. She wasn't. Genuinely today, she's a good dog. But these things happen, but our human nature is to focus in on those negatives and not look at all the positives. Going back to the recall example, if she was slow once but came back 19 times, actually that's a really high success rate. But I would be stressing about that one time she didn't. And I think we all do that. That one time she was slow. What does that mean? Oh my God, all my training's a disaster. And then we can catastrophize, which isn't helpful for us. So try and be quite analytical about this as well. It can be hard, but try and just be factual. Don't kind of justify it, just write it down. And then we can look at how could you improve? So the things that didn't go well, what could you improve? What could you do about those things that went badly? So, it could be, well, anything. It's so difficult because I don't know what you're saying is what didn't work well. what could you improve? So I'll go to the jumper example. So it didn't go well because I was wearing a jumper and it was flipping hot. What could I improve? I need to wear more appropriate clothing. How could I improve this is my next question, which would be, well, I probably need to look at the weather, have some self-awareness about the weather and about how hot I can get, and take actions on that. So it is a case of what didn't work. How could you improve that? What could you improve about that situation? And then how could you improve that situation? And they are actually different questions. The how, I really like this. I think it's much more productive to be looking at a negative situation, again, quite analytically taking that step back and going, right, that was a flipping disaster. But how am I going to make it better? What have I learned from it? How could I improve? What steps do I need to take? Now, this could be, I need to check the weather forecast before I walk the dog. It could be, I need to do some more training. I need to do some more learning. How can I do that? Can I buy a relevant book? I mean, I can't about my situation. I just need to, not wear a jumper. But in general situations, how could I do that? What could I do to improve that situation? So let's say you were in a situation where you thought, actually, I was well out of my depth with something. I had no idea what was going on. I smiled and nodded for 20 minutes and I left feeling like a fool. So how are you going to improve that? So you could do a couple of things. You could speak up next time. And when someone's talking rubbish to you, you could decide from a reflective point of view that the best action would have been to say, you know what, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm sorry. Or maybe it's a case that you think, well, actually, I know the subjects they were talking about, so I'm going to go and put some time into reading. I mean, obviously, if you want to buy books, please do. There's a really good book out called Small and Supercharged. Rumour has it. But you could go and buy a book, a flipping leather book. You could find a podcast for free. You could watch a YouTube video for free. You could do a free or pay for course about the subject or about the topic that you were struggling with and you felt you lacked knowledge in. So you're turning any negatives from your reflection into a positive. Another thing I like to think about is, was the outcome what was desired? And I think this can be quite useful because we're going back to the potentially the positive, but we might even be pulling out more reflective points. So maybe the outcome wasn't what was desired when you entered the situation, but due to the facts presented to you, you did a really good job. And therefore it was towards the end. And that can actually spin round to a really good quality of being flexible and adaptive to a situation, which is definitely what worked well, even if the outcome wasn't what you thought. Because sometimes you get into a situation, you have plan A, and then when all the facts are presented, you need to switch it to plan B, C, or D. And that, I think, is a really positive attribute. On paper, it might look like a fail, but actually it's not. I don't think so anyway. Another thing we can look at is our behaviour. So how did you respond? And it could be your outward behaviour to a situation. It could be someone said something stupid and you told them they were an idiot. Not good. Or it could be that somebody was very confrontational with you and you kept it in. You felt like you wanted to cry, but you kept it in. Analyze it. Look at these things and think about perhaps how you would do it differently, what you would say, what you could say, how you might not call someone an idiot. How can you put yourself in that person's shoes for a minute? Or what can you do? How did you behave? And is that okay? Were you happy with that situation? Would you like to improve? And how could you improve? Now, it could be if someone's being horribly confrontational to you and you just don't like that. I mean, why would you? Why should you? You can maybe think, okay, well, next time that happens, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not really into this. I don't like the way you're speaking to me. Well, let's draw a line under this. And you're kind of protecting yourself through doing that. It might be that you always make sure that someone else is there in a meeting with you because you don't like the way this person behaves and they make you feel uneasy. Or maybe it's a case that you record meetings, or maybe it's a case that you just don't go to these, or that you even do some work yourself in learning how to manage confrontational situations so you can manage this kind of thing better, because the better you become at it, the easier it'll be, not just for this person, but for other situations as well. This is the thing about the reflective learning. If you can take a step back, we can get really caught up in the emotion of it. If someone's rude to you, it's absolutely horrible. If you are there and someone's being foul to you and you feel completely powerless, you don't know what to do, you don't want to kind of fight back because that's not professional or whatever, but equally this isn't okay. It's really challenging to know what to do. And I think that it's useful to look back on it, sort of take a breath, take a step back and say, okay, if I was someone else, or even kind of trying to slightly disassociate yourself from the situation. So you've got person A and you, but think of it as person A and person B, and you're taking a step back and you're watching this whole thing unfold. How could that have been dealt with differently? Did you or person B do something to sort of inflame person A a bit? Whether it was deliberate or not, was there a trigger that happened that caused the behaviour? Again, you're analysing it, but it is really useful from a reflective point of view. And equally, could you improve that behaviour? Maybe you rocked up and you were absolutely exhausted and you just did not have the time or patience for the people that you were dealing with. Or you were exhausted and the thing that you were taking on really needs to be on your A game. You're probably on your, X game. And that was never going to produce a good result. So you beat yourself up about the situation, whereas actually it was never going to go well because you can see you were exhausted at the point you entered that thing. And that can then impact on our behaviour in terms of we're maybe shorter with people, we're snappy, we don't have the tolerance we usually have. We can't take a deep breath and go again. Or maybe you'd had an argument with somebody before you entered the situation and that directly impacted on your behaviour. So how could you improve that? Well, obviously try not to have arguments before things. Well, I guess try not to have arguments at all. But if you know that you've got something that you are doing, maybe have a bit of a gap. There's something that we've talked about a lot in mentoring and coaching, whereas having a little gap between between clients can be very useful because it allows you just to reset yourself and give your brain a little bit of breathing space, because sometimes you're working with people and they can tell you a lot of things, and it can affect your emotions. Maybe it's things that just strike a nerve with you, touch a raw nerve, and you feel sad or happy or exhausted or worried or whatever. We've all got our triggers that we're kind of hardwired for. And having that little bit of space could be how could you improve a situation? Well, actually, whatever happens in that 10-minute window, you go for a walk, make a cup of tea, have a stretch, get some fresh air, do something that just resets you. So you're at your A game again, or pretty close when you start. And by asking these questions, and add more as well. If you keep asking yourself, well, what else until you get there, until you get to everything that's in your brain, you can then start to see where you need to work, what you need to work on, what you did really well, what you're really strong at. And these can be really, really useful things because it allows you to continually learn. It allows you to look at what you need to improve on and learn more about that, learn how to do it, whether it's a skill or a behaviour modification or a chain of events that leads to a bad outcome. You can see it. Ideally, taking that step back and looking at that situation can also be hugely, hugely beneficial. It is a strange one. When you start doing it, it's weird. I'll give you that. Because usually, something happens and we think, oh, that was annoying. Oh, God, I haven't done that. Or that went well. But then we move on really, really quickly. And it might seem strange putting this much attention onto each action. I'm not saying you do it to each action, but it can be a really useful thing to do occasionally to specific situations that went well and didn't go well, to give you that in-depth and extra learning. I found it really useful. I need to do more of it, but I have found it very useful. When I apply it, it's very useful because I think I do a lot of this at kind of lightning speed and pick one thing out of each thing. Well, probably knowing the way that my brain, I think a lot of people's brain works, we focus on what didn't go well, what was an absolute disaster. We focus in on that. We use that as a stick to beat ourselves up with, and it doesn't lead to progression and progress and learning. And the thing about this reflection that we're talking about is the objective is learning, improvement, and the positive things. By looking at what went well and what didn't, we've got that overall look, so we can look at our strengths and our weaknesses, not just our weaknesses, because that doesn't help to give us confidence and confidence in our ability, in the way that we deal with things. And that's not helpful. We need that balance. We want to keep learning and keep growing. And this isn't you being arrogant or egotistical, saying that you were amazing at certain things. It's just fact. We've all got strengths and weaknesses, and if we can look at those, celebrate our strengths and know them, which we can then apply them in a more useful way, and look at our weaknesses and work on them, or at least have an awareness about them, and ideally make modifications to make those less, then that's a winner for everybody. Thank you so much for listening today. I have appreciated your company as always. If you have a few minutes and you would like to rate and review this on whatever platform you listen to the Small and Supercharged podcast on, I would be eternally grateful. Thank you very much for joining me today. Have a brilliant day, and we will catch up next week.